Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I'm co-host Michelle Gouveia, joined by co-host Chris Wells. How's your day going, Chris?
Hey, Michelle, it's going really well. I'm happy it's the end of the week. I'll say that. How about you? How are you doing?
Amen. Yeah. Beginning of April, birds are out, weather's better. All signs point to a good weekend coming up.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so cool. I'm glad. So I wanted to chat with you today. I know this is not, we're not in the business of rehashing topics all the time, but I had been going back through and just listening to some of the podcasts that you were recorded before I had the pleasure of joining you regularly on these. And the topic of talent in the insurance industry, specifically, I think underwriting. So there was a podcast you did with Stephen Weiss a while back, where you were talking about the talent issue or concerns about keeping talent within the underwriting role within insurance carriers stood out to me, and I was hopefully there's more to cover. I'd love to chat about that and what you took from that conversation, and what you may have learned subsequently since it became something that was on your radar after that.
Yeah, that one, if I remember correctly, I think that's episode 8. So for those of you out there who want to go find that one, I think it's number 8. So it's a little ways back. It's interesting that Stephen brought that up because I used to run this conference for actuaries and other, financial services professionals, trying to teach them Python, get them out of, Excel for everything.
Interesting. I learn something new about you every time, Chris. Just pulling back the layers of the onion.
Just learning how dumb and boring my hobbies are. Anyway, so we're trying to help these folks, get out of Excel because it's, more scalable, better technologies for some of the things they were trying to solve. And so I got to be good friends with some folks who were pretty high up at the Society of Actuaries. And last time I ran that,
Society of Actuaries.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah, I know a lot of actuaries. There's so many jokes I'd love to tell right now, but I won't. So the last time I ran this conference was right before, COVID kicked off, and everyone at the conference that was sort of, at a manager level or above was just lamenting the lack of talent pipeline on the actuary side. So I had sort of filed that away in the back of my head. And then when I was talking to Steven, I was like, oh my goodness, it's like top to bottom at insurance companies right now. Like the shortage of knowledge worker talent seems to be all throughout these industries. And I think, again, my memory is not the best, but I think Steven said it was a projection of something like 100,000 workers that the industry expects to be short over the next 2 to 4 years, which is absolutely massive, especially given, employment numbers right now. So yeah, I that one really stood out to me too.
Yeah, I think, the question that was posed or that comes to mind as a result of that, right, is what can the insurance industry do to attract more talent or retain the talent? And so the underwriting one is interesting because at one of the carriers that I worked with, they had a number of what I'll call development programs or leadership development programs that were usually either rotational in nature or where you sat in and just kind of were trained how to do a particular, whether it was product pricing or underwriting. So like underwriting development programs, things like that, where people would apply and go through a rigorous process to learn the job, right? But specifically with any of the nuance or specialization that would occur for the underwriting that carrier was doing. And so carriers are investing, a lot of time.
Yeah.
And effort into training up this workforce, and then unfortunately, people churn out or they leave after going through 6 to 12 months of this investment in them. And my own experience in joining an insurance carrier and working in the green screen for a long time
Okay.
is that the technology is just behind kind of where the generations are used to working
Yeah.
with. And so I have to imagine that's part of the disconnect of wanting to stay engaged sometimes, is that I've got the job, I understand the skill set, but this is feels so old school or so outdated that this can't be where the future is going, right? And so I wonder what you think about that. But I always think back to those days of like, wow, I was fresh out of college and was, working on a green screen on two different screens, like data entry, things like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it makes you wonder how these big, because I like to think of the insurance industry as a technology and data industry, right? Like at the heart, that's what it's comprised of. And so to think that's quote unquote the cutting edge of technology
I know.
uh, at these big companies is tough.
Yeah, I have two thoughts on that. One, you're absolutely right. Like you train someone up, you give them, a professional skill set, which is then very portable, and you don't have to stay in insurance with that skill set because at the end of the day, a lot of what you're learning when you transition industries is just vocab. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
skill set you churn out, find a place that doesn't have green screens and do a very similar job. The other side of it is like, if I'm 22 or 24, if I come out with a master's in computer science and I want to get a job as a developer, no one, the word sexy and insurance never in the same sentence, right? So if you're that age, you want to get a really good technology job, you're probably not thinking insurance first. And so you really put yourself in a double bind, both on like, the back office worker who has to interact with your systems, and also, where do you find the talent who could update and upgrade and make better those systems? And another issue that I've seen is that folks who engineering managers at insurance companies typically have been at those insurance companies for a very long time. And so even like, unless they're really sharp and really driven, just staying up to date on what's the latest way of thinking about software architectures and systems and all of that kind of stuff. It's a struggle.
Well, and this is probably a whole different topic for another day, but you raised that point of just duration, like longevity at a company, and that's just not as common as it used to be, right? Like you'd get into a company and people would have been working there for 15, 20, 25 years. And in a lot of cases now you see people leaving companies, I'll call a broad range of like 3 to 8 years, right? And
Yeah.
there's there's pros and cons to both of that. To your point, if you're locked into a single company for all that time, you become an expert in how that company conducts its business, and you understand the ins and outs, and you probably really knowledgeable about the product, the folks in the organization. But if you come from various organizations, you've got that breadth of knowledge of that exposure of how different companies do it, and that probably generates a lot of innovative thinking, or better problem solving in the sense that you can bring those experiences with you. But
Yeah, finish your
go ahead.
thoughts.
No, I was gonna say it's just it's a challenge. I think one, to keep the talent in-house in the company that you work for, but then as an industry too, you take some of those things. To your point, you say, "Hey, I was working in this technology in the insurance space, but I can port that over to this really exciting new industry or different industry that's exploding," right? And so that's a challenge. Both sides are a challenge.
Absolutely. And a lot of industries have sort of tribal cultures. None of them is
Mm-hmm.
quite like insurance in my experience, and financial services more broadly, where it's like, how can we bring this developer in? They don't know anything about insurance. And it's like, well, they don't exactly have to. They have to know how to code really well and architect scalable systems. It's you, the business's job, to make sure that they know what the mission critical things are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their job to know. Everyone needs to speak a common language, but like you both have to come towards the center to make those things work. And so you have folks leading these teams. They're very conservative. One of the You talked about that sort of cross pollination of ideas. One of the best and toughest things about working at a startup is that the average longevity of an employee at a startup is something like 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
Right? And so while that makes it tough to like, you're backfilling and training people all the time, it also means ideas are flowing and everyone's like sort of constantly up on what's the latest and greatest. And not that you can't still build bad systems that way, but it's a lot easier not to, for sure.
Well, I think that, when you think about startups and the innovation and the differentiation they bring, I'll speak specifically to the insurance industry, and that's where I'm focused.
Yeah.
That's really appealing, right? Because that there, within the insurance carrier, there's also always this build versus buy decision that's got to be made, right? And the build part is usually a challenge because of the amount of time it takes, and like once you're locked into doing it, it's hard to pivot or change the direction. Whereas on a startup, that's probably just constantly happening, just to your point, by way of who's there. And so the quicker turnaround, while a challenge from a training perspective, probably actually is why startups can be so successful in the like fail fast or the innovate and pivot and be responsive to the needs of the end customer that much faster.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked in a number of different organizations, and I think everybody basically gets innovation wrong, but they all do it in their own way. They all get it wrong in their own way. And I honestly, and this is not investment advice, as I always say, I think these really large insurance companies should solely be trying to innovate by acquisition and, investing in, venture funds, things like that. Large sort of well-established businesses, there's really no good way for them to carve out innovation in a way that doesn't get cannibalized by engineering or gets completely ignored by the business because they're not well connected. So just like I don't think it works.
Yeah, that a whole bunch of stuff that I could say there. Obviously, in my role, definitely appreciate that viewpoint. Staying on this topic of talent and employee retention, though, I think what is interesting about startups is, yes, people turn quickly, but there's usually a whole line of people to choose from, or that are interested in applying because of the nature of startups, right? They're nimble, they're quick, they're usually latest technology, they're doing really cool, exciting new things. Probably a bit harder to find that level of enthusiasm on the talent side when you think about the insurance job, right? And so a lot of time I'm thinking about if you had a new technology or you were doing these things within an insurance carrier, how do you attract that newer talent? And I'm going to keep picking on it. It's not telling them that on day one they're going to be on green screens, right? It's by telling them that on day one there's API connectivity and there's all of these new systems or things that are constantly changing. And so I think a question, or not a suggestion, because I'm not an HR person in the insurance space, but just how do insurance carriers highlight? I think they need to highlight the quote unquote innovative work that they're doing, the partnerships that they're leveraging, acquisitions that they've made that open them up to new business lines or new capabilities to serve their insurance customers better. I think sometimes that is missing, that the sense of, will people care because it's an insurance thing we're doing, but if it's a new cool insurance thing you're doing, I think people would care. No, and you talk to a lot of folks startup side, and selling into the carrier. So I'd be curious to how do carriers talk about what they're doing when you're chatting with them?
I'm usually talking to someone who's like a process owner, and so let me try to set up my second thought. My first thought is they're usually thinking, we know we have to make this much sausage, so can we compress the sausage making time to right? If you're 100,000 workers short, and a solution like Indico plus some process redesign can give you, say, 80% of the job done. When you log onto that green screen, 80% of everything's filled out because the AI has just found it for you. Well, now you're only 20,000 workers short, right? If you did that across, okay, all processes, right? That's optimistic, but so
for the sake of your argument, yeah, let's just go with that. Yeah.
Yeah, for the sake of argument. So you can compress that with that mindset, right? Like, let's streamline the process as much as possible, and then AI the things where it makes sense to AI the things, or automate, with RPA or whatever it is. What I think is lacking is, and this maybe is the next level of thinking, because I've been doing automation and artificial intelligence in the enterprise for a long time now. Once you have that process, then you can start thinking about, oh, okay, now I can really change the process. And I think HR should be thinking about, how do we change these roles to make them more interesting and engaging, now that it's not just like, look at that screen, type a thing in, look at that screen, type a thing in, right? Because now you can hire a data entry worker that can grow into becoming, the decision maker. Like, why do you have data entry and then underwriting? Why is that not just one person who has a much more interesting role now? And as they're growing and you're investing in them to get them to the place where they can be an underwriter, they're going to be much more interested in staying longer term because you've invested in them, and the role didn't stink day one.
Yeah,
so
and
that's my advice.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think harkening back to some of the conversations you and I have had on previous episodes about how data and automation, even if you're automating only a certain part of a process, can enhance the role of that human being in the process. And I think automating, we've talked about that high frequency, low complexity type of submission that comes in of, it's pretty standard. Do you really need eyes on it? Probably not. 99% of the time, you're gonna write it or you're gonna bind it. How do you create a process? What technology do you bring in? What capabilities to have that be straight through processing, so that those underwriters are truly looking at what I'll call the unique, the different, the more challenging submissions that come in, and probably learning a lot more, right? Because notably, those submissions are going to come with a number of key, I'll call it decision tree points or questions that you're going to have to reach out to who that product owner is or who that underwriting manager is. And that's a lot more learning and like new experience and engaging, I think, than just, oh, here's another very standard risk that yes, this checks all the boxes. Like, let me just get through 15 of these, as quick as I can.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't actually think, whatever the projections of the shortages are now, I think they're way overestimates, because we're having people do the wrong work. And we don't have to anymore. Like, there are good solutions for a lot of parts of this problem. And then the parts where there aren't good solutions, that's where, like, wet neural networks are the right thing to use. And people are going to want to do those jobs.
Yeah. I think too, something that we've seen, getting back to the technological capabilities and improvements that are made, is solutions that are brought in to supplement or enhance or improve the underwriting process, right? And so we've talked a lot about third-party data vendors that provide supplemental data to what's on a submission needed to validate. But there are a lot of cool companies, and this is a property and casualty example, but there's a lot of companies, insurtechs now, focused on geospatial data. And so that could be for underwriting or claims, depending on the use case. But, some of those platforms are really cool because you get to go in and you get to, visually see, think Google Maps, but like much more impressive. Right. You can dig in and understand, what is the square footage of this property? What is surrounding the property that could become a risk if they're in a wildfire zone? What are some of the, even like, to underwrite this, what are the risk mitigators that we need to tell them that they need to apply in order for us to bind this business? On a claims perspective, pre-catastrophic event, this is what the map looked like. Post-catastrophic event, here's the map. let's go out, let's send our claims adjusters to these places first because they're the hardest hit, or we know for a fact that this property was damaged or not. Let's reach out to the insured. But on the underwriting side, that's really cool because you get to go in and visually see some of those things. The challenge that we find sometimes is when you have a lot, I'll call it a lot of these cool solutions or systems that you're using, the integration is a challenge, or the workflow disruption is a challenge, because as I know, a lot underwriters already have to move through a lot of different systems or screens, and so adding a number of more, even if that improves the whole process, is likely a challenge. So when we're talking to startups, a key question that we have is, how do you fit into the existing workflow? Because people want to work with these cool things, but they're not going to do it if it's a ton of effort for little return.
Totally. No, we have the same conversations on the Indico side. Change management is so hard. It's so hard. And I know a few people are really good at it. Some of them are my colleagues here. But like, I think startups have to go in with a view towards not just how do we fit in the process, but how do we do the change management? Like, you don't have to figure all of this out. We will help you. We will partner with you. Here's how other organizations have done it. These are the things that you're going to trip over. Because if you just show up with, here's the shiny toy and we know exactly where it fits in your process, that's a lot, but it's not enough because they still have to change what they're doing and they're going to need help to do it because they don't probably see the end state as clearly as you do with the tool that you've built and all the time you've spent building it.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of this is getting into a whole different topic, but I'll touch on it because maybe it'll be interesting enough to do something, another podcast another time. But there are some capabilities that are on paper exactly what a company needs, like an underwriter needs, right? So when you're selling, it's like, yes, it says this is something I definitely need. The thing that we think about a lot, and I'll mention it kind of on that geospatial side, just because there's a lot of companies out there offering that, is what is the true differentiator? What makes your solution so sticky that it won't be, replaced by a solution that comes in that maybe has slightly better data, or basically that's the question, right? Is how sticky are you? And from our perspective, if you can integrate seamlessly into the workflow, if the value is there, we talk about the KPIs that you have to measure against and the ROI that you're seeing. But if the solution is we just need data, then chances are if there's better data in the future, you're going to get changed. So we think about what are the tools and the capabilities that are strongly strategically relevant and tied to what the underwriter needs. That's simple enough to integrate that it's not a complete, change management exercise. And then what are the additional benefits that the system can provide to you over time? So what's the initial value proposition? How can you integrate deeper areas of the workflow over time? And I think, having a champion internally that maybe owns that relationship or owns the use of that information and can create new processes and can upsell that internally into the organization, that's the kind of stuff that I think really resonates with people and says, I'm invested in this. And so I'm going to stick it out and I'm going to stay in this role or in this company because this feels like meaningful change, or what I'm doing is impacting something. That was a long, windy road to get to a point of get people to be invested in the work that they're doing to retain talent. But there's ways that bringing in third-party vendors can help do that, I think.
100%. Yeah, I mean, everyone wants a better user experience for their job, I think. And for the founders out there, for the people trying to sell these products, you have to be You have to sell at the high level, right? You're selling to the CTO or you're selling to some SVP that reports to them. But also you're selling to the people that are going to use your thing day to day. And, there's this phenomenon that happens where you sell a product, CTO gets really excited about it, you install it, and then there's this almost immune response to it from the boots on the ground. And they're like, I'm just going to use this workaround. I don't actually need this thing.
Yeah.
You have to be very wary of that, because you can lose, you'll churn the customer eventually if they're allergic to what you sold them.
Yeah. And that actually touches on, I think, a question you asked me in the very first podcast I did with you on the differences in what we're seeing in the space in terms of entrepreneurs. And I think that point that you just made is key, is that entrepreneurs that come from the insurance industry or that spent time working in these very, I don't want to call them niche roles, but specifically spent a lot of their career in underwriting or in claims, and know not only how to sell to these organizations, but generally know the workflow, know where are those points of integration that are easy, that won't completely change, a process that's been in existence for 20 years, give or take a few changes. And so being able to sell to that top tier management level and say that this is why the technology is important and this is the outcome we can sell to you, but also this is how we won't disrupt the people that have to work with this every day. I think, you need to have both of those elements considered when you're selling into, because to your point, you might say all the right things, but if no one's using it, that contract's not going to be renewed.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the CTO is going to be sad, and CFO will be sad, and everyone will be sad. Something I wanted to ask you, when it comes to like the messaging, do you see insurtechs like going to market with, hey, you have an underwriting shortage ahead of you, like use our tools to meet that, or has the messaging not quite gotten that specific yet?
No, I think we do see it. I think it depends on the solution, right, and where they're fitting in and what they're trying to do. But I think, and this, I'll bring it back to a broader state or more general statement, is that in the early days of insurtech, right, it was we want to disrupt the insurance industry. We're going to come in, we're going to make everything better, and this is like an old school industry
for property and casualty insurance.
Yeah. And I think now, and honestly, a lot of the pushback or the friction was, in the insurance industry, to your point, there are people that have been in the industry for decades.
Yeah.
And, these large companies, whether it be the insurance carriers, the insurance brokers, value their people and value the talent that they have. And so they're not, in most instances, looking for, even if it's an efficiency play, that their solution that they're looking for, they're not looking to replace huge swaths of people or fire huge swaths of people. They're looking for solutions that will improve the day-to-day experience of those, and to basically what we're talking about all day today, enhance their roles and help them grow within the organization, right? To grow that talent. And so we have seen companies that understand that, and they're not, when they come in, they're selling operational efficiency, but they're saying we can improve their work up by X so that they can spend time doing Y, right? And so it's not, we can provide you the solution and replace 50% of your call center workforce. Like that's not what we're seeing. That also doesn't land, at least with the folks that we talk to. And so you are seeing that messaging of we are providing the solution to improve the workflow, enhance the output, provide more analytics to make better business decisions by the people that are already doing that today.
Yeah. There's some like capacity increase to job satisfaction, ratio or product that people should be trying to optimize, I think.
Yeah.
It was a few years back, I was kicking the tires on RPA solutions, and one of the big ones, I won't say which one, of course, but one of the big ones said, look, we're going to be able to let you fire 80% of the people that work on this process. And I'm like, buddy, that's not why I'm here. The process sucks. Mm-hmm. I want it to not suck. I like the people. We need the people. We just need them to be using this and, not this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have seen the same thing in these industries, the change in messaging and really getting at what people are trying to do. But it's particularly acute in insurance, as you mentioned, because people, there are roles where you can stick around for a long time if you want to.
Yeah, and what's cool is, I mean, because of we've talked about underwriting today, but you can spend a whole career in insurance as an underwriter for a type of insurance product,
Yeah.
right? Like when we say underwriter, like people are probably like, oh, like there's all these different things, but you could be a personal lines underwriter for your whole career. You could be a cyber underwriter for your whole career, and the amount of knowledge that you pick up over that time, you become a true expert in that product line, right? And sometimes internally to what's happening at just your carrier or broader industry on how things are moving and will go over time. So there is a lot of tribal knowledge and a lot of benefit to freeing up people from the mundane so that they can learn from those people that have been in that role for so long, and just get up that learning curve that much faster.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it also creates career optionality too, right? Because you learn all of the lingo and all of the ins and outs as an underwriter. And then there are branches you can take into, for example, product design, right? I know folks who have gone from sort of like the actuarial risk side of things, and then they go to product because, you know what, I understand the one side of it. And now that I know that, I can design, the right shaped peg to fit that hole that exists in the industry. So insurance is not boring. There are very interesting careers. All of my actuary jokes are about how introverted and shy and boring those folks are, but they're not. They're actually brilliant people. And as I've said many times on this podcast and elsewhere, they're the original data scientists, right? So back to the HR question, if you have a shortage in that role, like talk to the industry about how exciting these things are. And they're going to be even more exciting in the next few years as the extra data sources get added that you're talking about, as, AI is just blowing everyone's minds. Like, top to bottom, insurance is interesting and is going to stay interesting for a while. At least that's how I see it anyway.
I think so.
Yeah. And I think at that, we're going to call this one. This has been another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. Stay tuned for episodes in the future where we talk about claims, AI changing everything in insurance and everywhere else. And Michelle and I will be glad to host you and see you there. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Chris.